Oh my God, man! We have four cygnets and two
hang on,
swans.
I'll break. Do you want to change your lens or anything?
Yes, I do.
I'll just stop us here. Well, we're here on the Camlin River, the archery of Longford. I'm John Connell. I'm the author of the cow book and the running book. And I've been back home in Longford for the last 5 years. And it happened by chance, but I took it upon myself to write a memoir trilogy. The first is the cow book and is the story of my life on the land and focused on a very small area. Then the running book was the story of North Longford and our history. And about a year ago, I hit upon the idea of finishing the trilogy by going down the Kamlin. Now, as to why I decided to do it, I'm not sure, but I'd spent my youth as a child playing on the Kamlin, and it was a big part of my life. And I struck upon it during the lockdown, and my friend Peter Gagan, another Longford man and a journalist, happened to be home. And so we decided that we'd go down together. Now, first of all, I had to secure a canoe, no easy task, but we got one. And we decided that we'd go from Balnalee to Clondra. And thankfully, I got a map from Marguerite Donlan in the council of the Kamlin, and I was able to use that to navigate myself around the river. The funny thing about maps is there's a language there that's all their own. And when I started researching this trip, I wanted to do some proper research first. I wanted to see when was the first documented map of the Kamlin. And it goes all the way back to 1601 with a guy called John Speed, who was an English cartographer. And it's the first sort of detailed map of Ireland. And in it, very prominently through Longford, is the Kamlin. And that set me to wondering, and I suppose what I realised was the Kamlin was a lot more important then. First of all, there was no roads in the 1600s. It was still, Longford was the edge of the Elizabethan world. It was a frontier territory. And the river would have been a mode of transport for people as well as industry. So the map kind of provided, and the river on the map was a lot bigger than what the river is now. And so from there I started looking at older maps from different censuses and things like that. And I saw that the river had been changed and moulded and had changed with time. It began as a small meandering stream, really, and the legend goes that a man was walking in Granard, lifted a stone, and the river burst forth. The really interesting thing about the river is it occurs in our while it has no mythology of its own, it does have a legend associated with it, which is St. Columkill, when he was coming through this land, when he would have set up the monastery on Lochgowna, he said that the Kamlin would turn blood red 3 times. And that prophecy has happened twice now. First time in 1798, when the British came and washed their bloody clothes in the river, turning it red with the blood of our people. And the second time was when there was a cholera outbreak in Longford town, and a butcher killed a load of sheep on the river. There was an old abattoir in the town itself, and it turned the river blood red again. So the third time has not yet happened, but when they say when the third time happens, it'll mark the end of the world. So it's quite interesting. Now, there's another famous river in Longford, the Inny, and it has its own goddess, Etan, and its own legend. But actually, in my coming to understand this place, I began to see that, there was legends all around it and legends all over the place, and the animals themselves even had stories associated with them. So the book has become, which I'm still writing, has become a sort of a nature book. And in that, there was a swan here earlier. I think he's departed now. But yesterday I was writing about swans, and I suppose how the imagination of the earth created the beauty of the swans. And I was fascinated with the mute swan. They don't really make a call, they hiss, even though their goslings make calls. And I was relating that to the voice that the children of Lur had. When Aoife turned them to swans, the one thing she left them with was a human voice. And it's a strange thing that the mute swan, the swan that has no voice, was given a voice in the children of Lur, and that's how they communicated with their father. And I was looking at Loch Derivara, where they spent their first 300 years, and it's really only a bird's flight away from us here. So we're living in the legend, we're living in the dream time here. And that's also not to mention that we also have the Tonbo Coolia running through the land. And of course, Queen Maeve and her soldiers would have come through this place in the long ago. So the Kamlin has been it's been a pivotal sort of place really. And when we went into the town, the trip itself took 2 days. And as we went into the town on the second day, I began telling Peter about the story of, I suppose, what the town was like back then. And something that I hadn't realised, which Martin Morris brought up to me, was the town has existed since the 1400s. There was a fortress built by the O'Farrells, and the interesting thing is that fortress was replaced then by the Azure family, where the modern barracks is and where the old castle was. And Martin himself said to me the reason that the fortress was built was probably because there was a crossing of the river there where the Camlin River Bridge is in the town. And Longford town was centred around the Camlin back then, even up until the 1600s. And it was only in the 1600s, with the Angers coming in, becoming the new lords of Longford, that the town actually started to slowly turn its back on the river, and it moved south to Main Street. The Angers built Main Street and the town moved further south. Now the Camlin has always been a divider between North and South Longford, but the Camlin then became a divider between the north and south of the town. And of course, as we know now, the south of the town is the bigger part of the town. So I just found that story really interesting, and also there was many really old books by various writers which were in the archive that I began to sort of look into to find out the different stories. And there was an Ordnance Survey guy called John O'Donovan, who came here in the 1830s, I believe, and he had said in his correspondences, his private correspondences, which I read in the archive, that Longford would be a pretty boring place and he couldn't wait to get out of it. But in that, I think he was totally wrong, because he missed all the history that was here. Not just 1798, not just the War of Independence, which of course hadn't happened by then, but the nature of river and water. And I think here in Longford, a little bit like the people in Cavan, we're water people, we're freshwater people. Wherever most of our villages and towns are built around water. Lanesborough, Longford, Balnalee, Ballymahon. We're a freshwater people, and we want to be with them, be near the river at all times and the fresh water. And it's just something that kind of struck with me, because when I was a young man working as a journalist in Australia, I became involved in Aboriginal affairs as a reporter, and they had a notion of freshwater people and saltwater people. And the two didn't mix, because the freshwater people were inland and the saltwater people were on the coast, but they respected each other. And I think in an island-bound nation, we happen to live in a landlocked area, but it's our freshwater that shapes us and shapes who we are. And in a way, it shapes our souls too, I think. You know, it's kind of an interesting thing that I've been slowly trying to delve into in this book. So that's a mute swan there. They're probably my and everyone else's favourite animal in Ireland, I'd imagine. They're so beautiful. The swans, to me, sort of symbolise the purity of this place. And interestingly enough, they feed mostly on vegetation. They eat plants. They eat a few amphibians and very small fish, but really it's all plants. So they're a very gentle creature on an area, and they don't really do much harm. And I suppose it's man's lot that we pick out certain creatures that we love and we want to protect them. And I think the swan in this country is the most important one, not just for mythological reasons from Celtic times, but also from, I suppose, reasons of beauty. And John O'Donoghue used to talk about that a lot, the man who wrote Anam Cara, you know, the nature of beauty. And I think beauty is a really important thing. So what happens for a lot of the swans is that the young swans, is they'll have to fly off, and a lot of them will join a colony of other single swans. And when they're in the colony, they will find a mate at maybe after about 3 years of age. They'll find a mate, and then they'll mate for life. And they'll fly off and find their own, I suppose, section of river or lake. Sometimes people in Longford think that we don't live in a beautiful county, but they're not. My thinking is, and I've been back here for 5 years actively looking at the place, writing about it, is they're not looking in the right places, because there's so much beauty here and so much to be seen and taken in. And it's just that we don't have the eyes to see it at times. Beauty is an innate human gift, and you have to keep beauty in your mind at all times, even at dark times. And I know myself, having went through struggles that I've went through, it was beauty that brings a smile to your face. So when I see the swans, I suppose I see the embodiment of that joy again. And they're just such a regal creature. And also what I like about them is, if you mess with them, they'll mess with you. So they're not to be taken lightly. Now, there's more animals here. I'm not sure what that was.
Is it a curlew?
It could have been a curlew, yeah. There's all manner of creatures here. We heard sky goats before, and snipe, and there was swifts and swallows moving over. I suppose one of the amazing things I saw was all the mayfly were they're finished at this time of year, but they were all mating on the river just near Ballinallee, and thousands of them. And the swifts and swallows were swooping in to eat them. And it was just like this aerial orchestra. And the amazing thing about the mayfly is that they could be waiting for 2 or 3 years as larvae and small insects in the river to come up for one day to mate. And they've no mouthpiece, they've no mouths when they turn into their final adult form, so they can't eat. So actually they mate and then they die and they fall in the river. And between the trout eating them and the birds catching them, there's only a very few that actually get to mate. And I didn't think there was mayfly on the river. I'd never seen it before, and I've lived beside the Kamlin all my life. There's a fish jumping over there. and it was just this amazing display of nature, and it really just kind of made me realise how special it was, you know. So we've come to a stop here now, and it's only when you stop that you really begin to notice a lot of stuff. On the river, what Peter and I found out was there's such a thing as river time. And river time, I suppose what it means is 10 minutes can feel like an hour, and an hour can feel like 10 minutes. There were sections on the river when we moved along that it just felt like an ageless sense of time had went by. And we were sort of what John Moriarty would call, we're in the Celtic dream time, because there's no hand of man anywhere. And in writing the book particularly, I started to realise that the rivers of Ireland are the last real wilderness left in this place. Everything else has seen the hand of man. Everything has, even the Wild West in Connemara there, it's cultivated. The trees have been chopped down. Nature has been curtailed. But on the rivers, that's never happened. It's a wild place, and the creatures that live on here, as much as we might admire them and look at them for their beauty, they're totally themselves. And there's a look between us and them which is has to be a look of respect, because we don't control them. We don't control the swan, we don't control the duck, we don't control the otter. They do their own thing, and we have to respect that. So that was something that really hit me, and I suppose as we moved from Ballinallee on up, we began to see nature just kind of unfold and doing its own thing. But that was, I suppose, the most beautiful aspect of it, was looking in the river and seeing a shoal of fish, cresting by a corner and seeing a duck and her family, or I suppose the loveliest of all, seeing the swans and their cygnets, and they're moving in pairs. And the thing I really liked about the swans was, of course, the children allure stuff. But all the animals have their own mythology and their own stories. And the really interesting thing was, on the river, we actually started to see creatures that are rare. And so we saw Azure Bluets, which are a type of damselfly, which are incredibly rare. And the last known sighting nearby was in Lough Ree. So as I began to study them after the fact, I realised that they were here on the Kamlin too. And the other really interesting thing that was on the Kamlin is the highly endangered and the oldest living animal in the world, in Ireland, the freshwater pearl mussel. And when I was researching the trip, I went to the origin of the river, up at the Corban River, up in Clonfin in Granard. And up there it's a wild place. It's bogland. It hasn't really been cultivated or curtailed in any respect. And looking in the river, I found these freshwater mussels. And they don't exist in, I would imagine, probably 90% of the rivers around the country. We don't know that we have them here. They're not on the biodiversity record. We're actually changing that now, and it's going to be updated thanks to Mairead. But nobody knew they were here. And it just goes to show you how healthy the river is and how untouched it is. And you know, we're all the time talking about the hidden heartlands, but we're right in it now. We're here. Like this, it doesn't get any more pristine than this. And that, I suppose, was the thing that really struck me as the most amazing, was the wildlife, because it totally humbles you and it makes you realise that man, the world does not revolve around man and his thoughts. We're passing through, and in a sense, we have to remember that. We have to remember what we've forgotten, because it's the most important thing. So the Kamlin has taught me a lot about being on it, and it's given me a newfound respect for nature. And I'm a farmer and I'm in nature a lot, but I've never experienced it like this. The plants, the animals, the weather, and kind of being on a force that's bigger than yourself. And that just changes you, and it has changed me.